All right, so I know we'll have a few more people joining us as we go along, but I want to welcome everyone to the North American Fruit Explorers 2023 virtual conference. My name is Leslie Wade, and I'm a volunteer board member of NAFEX, as we call the organization for short. I'm also our conference chair. Before I introduce Chris, our president of NAFEX, who's going to introduce our speaker, I'd like to share just a few housekeeping items with you and just a little bit about NAFEX in case you're new to our organization. So first, this is a webinar. So unlike Zoom meetings, participants' audio and video are disabled automatically by Zoom. So you'll notice that you can't chat with one another and other participants like you normally would in a meeting. So we're going to ask you, please, to put your questions and your comments as well into the Q&A. You can even answer and comment on other people's questions and make it a dialogue. If you have information to share, we really encourage you to do that and put that in the Q&A as well. If you happen to have any technical difficulties, please use the chat for that and let us know how we can help as our hosts. Let's see. So this webinar is being recorded and it's going to be made available to members of NAFEX for the next year, and then it will be moved over to our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel name is NAFEX TV, and we have some previous conference recordings there that you can also check out. So just a few words about NAFEX, just in case you're new to the organization. Founded in 1967, the North American Fruit Explorers is a network of individuals throughout the US and Canada devoted to the discovery, cultivation, and appreciation of superior varieties of fruits and nuts. NAFEX members share ideas, information, experiences, and fruit propagating material via our website, social media channels, fruit-specific interest group meetings, and annual conferences like this one, whether it's in person or virtual or both. As a paid NAFEX member, you get 4 editions of the Pomona Journal each year, as well as the ability to search 50 years of digitized Pomona journals in our digital library, which is also available online. There are some other great tools and features in our website, so I encourage you to go to visit nafex.org. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce my colleague on the board and our president, Chris Klug-Heater, who's going to take it from here.
Thank you, Leslie. It's my pleasure to be introducing Mark Shepard today as our session speaker. Mark's the CEO of Forest Agriculture Enterprises. He's the founder of Restoration Agriculture Development and an award-winning author of the book Restoration Agriculture, Real-World Permaculture for Farmers. It's a fabulous book. If you've not picked it up, definitely read it. He is also known as the founder of New Forest Farm, a 106-acre perennial agriculture savanna. He was certified as a permaculture designer in 1993, and he received his diploma of permaculture design from Bill Mollison, the founder of the International Permaculture Movement. He teaches agroforestry and permaculture worldwide, and you can learn more about what he does at forestag.com. And with that, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Mark. This is going to be one amazing and fabulous session. Take it away, Mark.
Thank you for the intro, Chris, and thank you to you and NAFEX, the whole board, for inviting me to this and giving me the opportunity to share from my experience. There's other things I could add to that, but just let me warn all the participants. This is going to be a fire hose session. We're going to go rapid fire, super, super fast. Let me put on the share screen here. This was the workshop description that I was supposed to follow, and it's like, oh my gosh, how like polite and respectful. This drove me nuts on so many different levels that I gave it a try. Okay, here we go. It's our approach to growing low input edible woody crops using the technique of stun, which originally was sheer total utter neglect, has been now amended to be strategic total utter neglect. You got to know when and how you can neglect your plants. And then the more I looked at this, is like, I can't do this. I can't do this. The times are so urgent that I should be giving a presentation on how to survive the zombie apocalypse. We have how many wars going on, live action right now around the world? We have shortages of fertilizers, in part because of these wars that are around the world. 50% of the human race doesn't even exist within the economy. So education and jobs isn't going to do them a darn bit of good. What happens when we won't even talk about what's going on with elections now? What happens if there's some kind of crazy stuff and this country goes haywire? Can you continue to grow your crops and feed yourself and your family and to survive where you're at? Well, what about ecological catastrophes? We have to now create and breed and help to drive natural communities forward as climate change is so fast. We are the critical link in assisted migration around the world. If this is too fast and we don't get to cover everything, I'll be doing a long version. It will be all day at the Acres USA conference coming up in December. You can click on that link up there to get you there. And if you haven't read my books before, they're available at Acres USA. Acres USA is my publisher. And Restoration Agriculture was the first. It's the introduction to my particular approach to agriculture, especially perennial woody agriculture. And if I knew that it was going to win 3 literary awards and become an Amazon #1 bestseller, I would have done a lot better job. So that's where you can find those books. Oh, by the way, the water management books, they have them in Audible, but don't get them in Audible because there's too many pictures and diagrams. Restoration Agriculture is fine. It's great to listen to while you're driving down the road, but the other 2 require a lot of diagrams and images to look at. So concepts are intellectual constructs that we hold in our minds, and we're trained and we naturally just come up with concepts to describe our world around us. Concepts act as lenses through which we see the world. Why is this important? Well, this is important because many people don't see reality. They look through their concepts and they see the world through their concept. And I'm going to have a couple examples here. The next slide I show you, if I'm doing this correctly, is some fruit. And what I want you to do is look at that fruit, and then you, in your mind, say, what color is that fruit? There it is, right there. Now, I don't know how many of you it was, and this isn't a right or wrong thing, is if all of a sudden you said yellow when you saw these bananas, you are seeing the world through your concept of what a banana is. And you failed to see reality as it actually is. This is a black and white photo. These are little black dots, and the white that goes with it to come out grayscale. This is black and white. This is not yellow. This is yellow. When we see the world through our concepts, it's such a strong filter that we fail to see reality. And those of you who saw this and immediately thought, yellow, you're seeing the world through your concept. You wouldn't believe what you missed. I'm going to go to another example of this, and I'll give you a concept ahead of time. Next photo that I'll show you is a messy pile of rotting leaves, sticks and debris and seed pods and all that kind of stuff. This is surface litter that you would find on like a forest floor. This is part of the natural soil creation process. There it is, surface litter, leaves and sticks. I see a seed pod, all kinds of stuff. There's green, there's twigs. If you were to increase or alter your senses, your ability to sense what's actually going on in the world, you would have a different perception. It would enrich your experience. You would have a different experience in the world. Well, so you can go train in the special forces, you can go to tracker school and learn all kinds of ways to observe differently. Use your senses, interact with the actual world. Use as many of the 33 scientifically known and proven senses that we actually have. And if you're thinking to yourself, oh, wow, we have 5 senses, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, guess what? You're living through the world of concepts, and you wouldn't believe all these other senses that we have that are scientifically confirmed. One way to also change our perception of reality and to change the reality that we actually experience is to change our concept. So this photograph right there with the surface litter, let's change the concept. That's a nesting pair of whippoorwills. By changing our concept, immediately we see something different. And if you don't see the nesting pair of whippoorwills, they're sitting right there. And it almost like once you see them, you can't unsee them. So part of why I'm leading off with this is how we have been taught and trained in our language. The introduction of what I'm supposed to be talking about is laced with these concepts that don't help us to accomplish our objectives as farmers, growers, environmentalists, or whatever you want to call yourself. This right here, this, you may have a concept in your mind that pops into your mind. This is just a concept imposed onto reality. This is not how the world works. This is it. It fights against nature. This is a twisted bastardization of how this planet works. Everything about it is fairly messed up. It's costly, it's destructive, and it's a heck of a lot of work. And oftentimes, it's not even going to cash flow for you. Now, nature creates healthy, fertile, living soil. If it didn't, where the heck did it all come from in the first place? It removes carbon from the atmosphere, pollutants from the soil and the water, while producing a vast array of products that are the basis of our personal and collective economy. It's our food, it's our fuel, it's our medicine, it's our fiber, it's our building materials. And part of the process, nature selects for pest and disease-resistant populations through time. Let's use emerald ash borer right now as a new pest to this continent, North America, that's really running rampant across the whole entire continent. This problem will get solved through time. And what gets selected for is the ash trees that don't really die when they get hit with the emerald ash borer. They'll be able to reproduce, pass their genes on to the next generation. That's the whole secret of how nature works to breed pest and disease resistant populations. Nature does it at zero cost using all natural products and processes and is non-toxic, doesn't pollute, and this is what we strive to imitate. And that's the set of principles, natural principles and ecological concepts is how we transitioned cornfield at the top of this photo into what you see down below, the L-shaped property, New Forest Farm in southwest Wisconsin. We have to understand that no matter where we live on planet Earth, what we see around us isn't a fixed, static thing. It's all in the process of change. Now, the planet, if we started with bare rock, eventually gets covered with lichens and mosses, smaller little plants, grasses and flowers and perennials and shrubs, sun-loving plants, then shade-tolerant plants, and eventually, over a period of time, becomes a closed canopy forest that's limited by the hot, the cold, the moisture availability, whether it's too dry, too wet, etc. And what happens through time, through the process of soil mineralization, is the bedrock of the planet itself dissolves and gets mixed with organic matter and all kinds of life. Inevitably, something happens naturally and comes and wipes it out. It's an ecological disturbance, a natural disturbance. It could be fire, windthrow, grazing, human activity such as tillage, mowing, logging, etc. Reality happens. Let's flash back in our mind to Paradise, California. California is a fire ecosystem, period. There are fire records on redwood trees that go back for 5,000 years, showing that episodically fires come roaring through California. Not little surface fires. Yes, there were lots of surface fires, but big, blazing, knockdown, drag-out, kick-ass forest fires that wipe everything out. If you look at pictures that were taken immediately after the fires in Paradise, California, look around, what do you see? The human infrastructure was virtually destroyed, but it's filled with green. There are all kinds of plants out there that not only are they adapted to fire, they actually depend on that fire for their regeneration, or else they won't regenerate that ecosystem. A certified organic regenerative broccoli farm in Paradise, California that got burnt to the ground didn't regenerate, therefore it fails the ecological test of if it's regenerative. So we have this disturbance that changes things. Most agricultural land is typically in that stage of succession. It wants to go through natural succession and develop the ecosystem, become more complex, more species diverse, the soil becomes richer and thicker. But what our agriculture tends to do is we disturb it again. We plow it up, or we herbicide it, and then again and again and again. If you don't believe that your place is going through natural succession, go ahead and plant a garden. Let's use corn, beans, and squash as an example. When you go ahead and you plant your garden, you're going to have weeds coming in. Weeds are nature's way of taking your place and starting to move it into the next ecological stage of succession. So instead of fighting against this, we work with this, understanding that if this is where our site is right now, this is where it wants to go. And it's regionally specific and sometimes site specific, from Arizona to Texas to Maine to Alaska. Different species involved, different disturbance regimes involved, different temperatures, soils, et cetera, et cetera. So your system will end up looking much more like your place than anywhere else. Arizona system will look like Arizona. This is in upstate New York. This was a clear cut. Now, what happens in this clear cut here is this is an extractive process. Human beings went in, they cut all the trees down. Why did they leave one birch in the middle? I don't know, maybe for seed. But what happens, succession occurs. There's a genetic inertia, a biotic inertia from the seeds coming into the site that are going to drive it forward. It's going to revegetate and it's going to redevelop until once again it's going to look like this, once again in upstate New York. And I'm going to ask you a question about this. Who did cover crops for 3 years? Who made compost for umpteen years? Who dug a $40 hole for each $10 tree? Who did weed control, pest control, disease control? Who did trellising? Who did tree stakes? Who did tree tubes? Who did irrigation on this right here? Either nobody or nature, or however you want to describe this. This didn't cost human beings 1 red cent to do this, and it regenerated itself, and it increased the health of the system. This is the power of nature that we harness to use in our systems. This is an example of a place that I went to. The farmer wanted me to help design a agroforestry system. And if you've ever been in the northeastern part of the USA, if you aren't actively fighting against the trees, they're actively winning. And so I had to take the picture because he wants me to go out and what species should we use? What species should we use? And if you look at this picture, we've got hazelnut, we got gooseberries, we got currants, we have raspberries and blackberries, we have American beech. The white flowers were on some of the biggest service berries, June berries that I've ever did see. There's cherries, there's pine, there's sugar maple. This is a 100% locally adapted perennial agricultural system, but he doesn't see it because he doesn't have a concept for it. By observing nature and working with nature rather than fighting against it, we're able to learn how it works. And we can now design and create productive systems that operate at extremely low cost with very few external inputs. Flash back in your mind to the clear cut. They extracted a resource, they extracted timber. What they left behind, maybe they'll replant. So there's one entry into that field as they plant it. Then for 3 years, maybe they do some weed control for herbicide, flaming, or hand pulling, whatever they're doing. Then they don't go back there for 10 to 15 years, and then they do a pre-commercial thinning and they remove some more material. Usually they lay it on the ground. Well, then 15 years later, they go in and they harvest some material for pulp. And then 15 years after that, they have their first commercial harvest. Now we're like 30, 45 years into the program. And then 15 years after that, they have a commercial harvest 6 times. They only went into that field 6 times and they harvested all that resource and it took care of itself. What if we designed a system that had all these different food plants and we treated it the same way with minimal inputs? If we only went to this place 6 times in 50 years, that's really affordable. And we didn't do any of the herbicide, fungicide, tillage, irrigation, nothing that a orchard, in air quotes, might require. By changing our thinking and then our actions, we create systems that agriculture and horticulture may not understand because we're interacting with the planet how it actually is rather than through imposed intellectual concepts. They're seeing the world through concepts. We're interacting with it directly and operating how it operates. This right here, New Forest Farm, is not this. And that is not this. The numbers and the math that universities and extension folk use to describe the economics of how orchards work do not apply to natural systems. And their way of thinking about things will bankrupt you, and they can prove over and over and over again that if you try to grow a system like this, you can't afford to do it. Well, the reason why you can't afford to do it is you can't afford to do all the things that's happening in this picture, and you can't afford to do all the things that are happening in this picture because you don't have to, because nature does it. Ecology rules, whether we like it or not. Nature bats last is another way of saying it. The nature operating system is AI. It is AI, actual intelligence, Why not work with it, for crying out loud? It's been here since the beginning, whenever that was. So part of the AI of nature is plant communities. Around the world, plants occur in like groupings, or like cousins and friends and neighbors and all that kind of stuff, neighborhoods. They're called natural plant communities, plant associations. Permaculturists, they call them guilds, and they think they have to invent them. They've been invented for, zillennia. Everywhere that you see gray or black in this particular picture is a particular plant community type, one of the most widespread, actually around the globe, and it's based around the Fagaceae family. And the Fagaceaes are oaks, chestnuts, and beech. What do oaks, chestnuts, and beech produce? They produce nuts, and they're usually mostly tall trees. They're canopy trees. Oaks and beech bear crops irregularly. They mass. They have high yielding yields, and then years, and then some years with nothing. Whereas chestnuts yield quite regularly. Oak and beech have high oil, and chestnut actually has very low oil, and it has a modest protein. It's mostly carbohydrate. It's like a grain that grows on a tree. Apples, malices, also your Crataegus, your hawthorns, and that sort of thing, and all their cousins, including pears and whatnot. Roses are in the same plant family. As an understory, there's hazelnuts, are one of the dominant shrubs in the Fagaceae plant community, and they exist from the Arctic all the way down to the tropics and subtropics. The prunuses occur as overstory, midstory, understory, plums, cherries, peach, apricots, almonds. There's some that grow along the ground like beach plums and so on. There's raspberries, blackberries, grapes, currants, gooseberries. There's fungi, forage, and livestock. I want to ask you a question. Do you see anything in here that's edible by humans, for one? For two, do you see anything that is something that we can feed to an animal? Actually, there's animals in there, so they're going to be eating it. There's going to be green grass growing all around, but they can also eat the fruit and the nuts, et cetera, et cetera. Is there anything in there that we can use as a resource other than for food, like for wood, for paper, for clothing, et cetera? All of these exist on this continent. They exist in most continents around the world, living together. Why should we cut all that down to plant soybeans? Makes no sense to me. No sense whatsoever. And this is the kind of systems that you can set up, and this is what it looks like for real on the planet. These are all photos from my place, New Forest Farm in Southwest Wisconsin. This does not look like an orchard that we saw earlier. It doesn't obey the same rules that orchards do. It does not have the same cost structure that orchards do. It is a almost wild natural system. The one thing that you could call domestic is the fact that there are human beings interacting with this on an active and a well thought out, I hope, a well thought out manner, in order to get as close as we can to mimicking the natural disturbance regime, the natural disturbance cycles of this place. And then, of course, we're harvesting all kinds of stuff from the system. Obviously, you see here from pork to beef to hazelnuts, apples, grapes, and on and on. So more of nature's AI, why nature is so brilliant. If we're looking at this right here, this shows the approximate photosynthesis per hectare. And we look right here, cultivated land, there'll be about 600 grams per square meter of photosynthate produced. So in corn, that's it. You basically can't get any more corn than 600 grams per square meter per year. Seasons come and go, but you can't beat that. You just can't. They just can't. There's not enough photosynthesis, not enough surface area to catch it. However, once we start the process and transition toward a more woodier, brushier system, we now have this woody shrubland. Well, already we got an extra 100 grams per square meter per year. We have more energy to work with. We don't need to get the same yields as you get with corn because we have more energy to work with. Once you approach the savanna, wide open canopy, multi-story, all in between, animals all over the place, we're now capturing 30% more sunlight than a cultivated field would. Well, then as this savanna starts to close in and almost becomes a closed canopy forest, son of a gun, we now have double the photosynthesis happening on that piece of property than cornfield ever does. And that's in part from the three-dimensionality. It's in part from the shade tolerance. Different species have a different tolerance. And so we can capture so much more sunlight. And you saw some of the species that we can use to pull that sunlight out of the atmosphere and turn it into food, fuels, medicines, fibers, et cetera, for people. So we're working with twice the energy almost as annual crop farmers. Then there's another principle that the agroforesters use quite a bit that's called the land equivalent ratio. They like to do math, and they like to do it in such a way that it's really confusing, so you don't understand it as well. I can't get that complicated, so I think of things more simply. And I'm going to refer to a PhD thesis that was done from University of Illinois that dealt with maize, corn, and black walnut. If you have an acre of corn, you're going to get 100% corn off of that. And if you're in Illinois, you're probably getting top yields. So let's make 3 strips out of that and take 20% of the land out of corn. Now you're only going to get 0.8 of a yield of corn. Oh my gosh, you got reduced yields. Oh, you can't feed the world that way. Well, now we have these 3 strips available, 20% of the land available for walnuts. And what we're going to do is, because it's so wide, they'll get sun from both sides. We can put a higher density of walnuts in there. We can put a 50% stalking density of walnut on that particular field. So we get 80% of a corn crop, 50% of a walnut crop. 0.8 plus 0.5 is 1.3. You have a land equivalent ratio of 1.3 with twice the energy to work with, and the multiplier effect of getting reduced yields, but more total site yield. Ecologists have proven over and over again, the more species per acre you have, the higher your total yield, site yield is. And that's what we're after, isn't it? Is total site yield. This is an example from my place, just a photograph of it. It's chestnuts, green bell peppers, acorn squash, and sunflowers. And if you think of planting a full planting of chestnuts, sunflowers, peppers, and acorn squash, but I only got a half a yield of each, half plus a half plus a half plus a half is 2 total yields. And as you can see, I wasn't really too concerned about the weed pressure. Now, when I grew produce, I've retired from growing annual produce now for 3 years. We sold our produce wholesale through the Organic Valley Cooperative, and we were loading semi trucks with pallet loads of peppers and acorn squash, et cetera, et cetera. This was not like take a few boxes to farmers market on Saturday. This is a mass production model if we want to do it. And we get yields. We will get fewer apples on this particular acre than you would if it was all apples. We'll have fewer grapes on this acre than if it was all grapes, fewer hazelnuts than if it was all hazelnuts, but we have more total yield because of the combined effects of them, especially when you think we have chestnuts up high, apples down low, grapes crawling all over the mess, currants underneath in the shade, hazelnuts growing as a shrub, raspberries coming out from the outside, and grass all over the place. Look at all the different crops, all the different yields that we're getting. In between the alleys, I'll go ahead and I'll grow small grains. My favorite is winter rye, and I'm growing it mostly because I want to have that biomass, that hard woody biomass, to decompose approximately 4 to 6 tons of hard woody organic matter right on the site, including the roots now in the ground. That's the fuel, the carbon, that now feeds the soil food web, which is pooping and peeing and liberating all these nutrients for my next crops down the line. And if you just wanted to look at yields on this, this is on an acre of apples. I'll use apples as an example. I'm still getting 1,680 pounds of rye per acre, and that'll feed 2 pigs to finish weight. And if I'm doing $4 a pound direct to the consumer, I'm making $1,600 per acre in my apple orchard, and I haven't even harvested an apple yet. And we'll do more of that later on down the line with some more math. And the mix underneath, so first of all, I've got this, the small grains are growing. I'm growing it mostly for the biomass. I don't really care about the grain harvest. Sometimes I have harvested it. I'm interested in the biomass for decomposition. Then I have a mix of yellow sweet clover and hairy vetch and red clover, white clover, Alsike clover, just a crazy mix of legumes. Now, sweet clover alone has enough nectar to make 250 to 500 pounds of honey per acre. At $5 a pound wholesale is 1,250 pounds of honey per acre, plus the 1,600 per acre of pork. I'm already up at $3,000 per acre in my apple orchard. I haven't even picked an apple. All of this applies to both the East Coast and the West Coast. There's different subspecies and there's different issues, especially related to water. So, Pat, to answer your question or address that, I would do the same thing where you are in the Western USA. Then what I do, instead of having a roller crimper, which I don't have, I've got an orchard mower and I've got the front end loader on my tractor. I will take the front end loader on my tractor and have it slightly tilted up, and I just mash everything down. And the mower on the back, sometimes I just roll the crop down, and other times I will mow it and chip it all up. In this case here, I'm mashing down the rye. The rye seed scatters all over the place. I end up with a bucket full of rye seed in the front of the tractor, so I've got seed for next time. And all the rye seed that falls is now under mulch, and it'll sprout. All of the clover that was planted at the same time as the rye now comes up underneath and takes over. What I do before I do the mashing, rolling, or chipping, I'll take wine cap Stropharia mushrooms or agaricus mushrooms. Sawdust spawn, I got this from Field and Forest Products in Peshtigo, Wisconsin. And I'll just toss it around. I'm not going to follow all of the instructions and directions that they tell you have to do. You're going to end up like with serious constipation issues if you follow everybody's directions. Just throw the stuff all over the place. This is mushroom spawn. If it has a chance to live, it's going to, and it's going to do very well. And the Stropharias naturalize really, really well. So after a while, I've got, acres and acres, 4 to 6 tons of straw. When was the last time you mulched every acre of your property with 5 tons of mulch? You can't possibly do it, but you know what? You can grow it in place and you can roll it down. And that's, 4 inches or so of hard, dry, woody organic matter sheltering the soil. It stays moisture underneath. Now you've got a layer where all the different worms and soil life can flourish underneath, and the clover comes up through it. See all the clover by my fingers? You can see this rye is now starting to break down, to rot. I got this incredible flush of Stropharia mushrooms that I can sell. Morels and the asparagus, of course, I've got asparagus growing all over the place. Who on earth and why on earth would you spray fungicides in your fruit orchards when you could have fungus? This is what we want, is we want fungus, our fungus, competing with the fungus that might harm our apple trees. Once again, just a mix of clover. Look at the biomass. Sometimes upwards of 300 pounds of nitrogen per acre is what we've calculated. We haven't had anybody measure it because this doesn't look like an orchard, and orchard people don't want to measure stuff that doesn't fit their coloring book. But those are indeed apple trees and chestnut trees all along the side. Beautiful, beautiful vetch stand. And what I do, I let all those clovers and all the vetch all go to seed, because after I've mashed down the rye starts to sprout underneath, but all the clovers and vetch grow up and it goes to seed. Well, then when I mash that down, the rye emerges from underneath that straw from the legumes. So I get 2 applications of mulch per year as I drive over it and just mash things down, and it all reseeds. And sometimes if the stand of grains aren't worth harvesting with a combine, I'll turn the cows loose. Notice they're not necessarily after the grain. They're after the green that's down on the ground. They're eating the clovers. Another thing I want you to notice, on the left, there is a dead apple tree. I give quite a few farm tours here, and people often ask, what's wrong with that tree there? And I say, who cares? Because I don't care. Part of this process is if the plant is struggling, having a hard time surviving, it's not worth my while. I'm not interested in it if it catches a disease. I'm not interested in it if its fruit gets loaded full of bugs. I want the ones that succeed. And look at this. I've also heard that dung beetles can't survive in Wisconsin because of the cold winters. Well, they seem to survive here just fine. Here's my favorite. My favorite farm workers are the piggies. Pigs actually can get a tremendous amount of their feed from grazing. I do feed them a little bit of mixed grain, mostly as a vitamin supplement and as bait to get them to come to me. Each species, whether it's the pigs or the cows or chickens, I whistle them to me. They all have names. and I have a little bit of grain as the bait to kind of get them, condition them to come to me. So whenever I whistle, they follow me. Then in the end of the season, I'll have the trailer parked up top, and I just whistle them on the trailer and load them up pretty stress-free. This is chestnuts with currants underneath, and elderberries and mulberries and grapes and raspberries and hazelnuts, and obviously pork. This, I had to show this picture. This is a different kind of dung beetle. There's a beetle underneath there, and it dug its way around just under the soil, and it kept going around and around and around and around, and you'd see that turd start to tilt until about 5 minutes later, that turd went down the hole. It's gone. I've got animals pooping and peeing, cycling my nutrients, mowing my grass, eating diseased fruit or fruit that has larvae of pests in it. This is a semi-natural system. Pest and disease pressures are limited or lowered because of the animal impact and how we're cycling things. And this does not look like an orchard. This does not look like an orchard. So to keep the pigs and cattle in, I'm just using electric fence. The pigs have a 2-strand, one at about ankle height and one at knee height. The picture a few frames ago, some guy said once, is that all you use to keep the pigs in? I said, yeah, that's it. He said, well, that's not a fence, that's a suggestion. Well, I suggest they stay in. This photo will show here, look to the right, that's the neighbor's farm fields. If my fence goes down, do my pigs have any interest in going next door? There's no food there. They have no habitat next door. They stay here. We have a functional oak savanna restoration, and it's the agricultural harvesting the agricultural products that has paid for this restoration work. This is what it looks like for real. It's beautiful. Tremendous hazelnut yields, tons of hazelnuts, tons of chestnuts, mushrooms everywhere. I eat mushrooms almost every single day of the year. So you can imagine all the different wildlife that goes along with these prairies and savannas that have become extinct. This is actually an active, functioning farm that pays more than a corn crop will. Now, back to the breeding hardcore flash round. This is a picture of Luther Burbank. He was in Lancaster, Massachusetts, which was the home of my birth. I lived on this hill, and a river looped around the bottom of the hill. And if you went south, you crossed the river, and you went north, you crossed the river. If you go south, you went right past Luther Burbank's homestead, where he grew up and where he developed the Burbank russet potato, which is the standard French fry potato for industry. If you went to the north, you went right by the John Chapman birthplace homestead. That's Johnny Appleseed. These are two of my, I was surrounded and steeped in these guys. Luther Burbank is the individual who is credited with having the most varieties of plants named after or based on his breeding work, over 800, varieties of plants from his breeding work. He used mass selection breeding. He did all of this breeding work before we even knew what a chromosome was, let alone DNA, let alone having the technology of CRISPR. So this is all done through mass selection breeding. Johnny Appleseed is basically the single person who was credited with the explosion of diversity in apple varieties in North America. And I see the question from Caitlin Chambers. Caitlin Chambers, there are too many things in there for me to answer right away without getting frustrated, because recommended varieties to be more productive in a system like this, it's the system that's productive, not necessarily the individual varieties. You plant all these varieties, and as we'll go through in a few slides forward, we plant way too many, high density, a broad selection, and we let nature sort it out. So this is one of my inspirations, Luther Burbank. You can look him up. Here's a couple of links. Now, mass selection refers to the method of crop improvement that where our plants or animals are selected on the base of their phenotype, their physically observable characteristics. All of us, you and I, can observe plants and animals to see which ones are the most productive, bear youngest in their lives, are pest and disease resistance, and we can see the ones that get all kinds of diseases and fall apart and die. It's a human enhanced mimic of how nature sorts things out. The phenotype is a set of observable characteristics. Any of us can observe and measure things, keep track, keep records, mark plants, tags, flags, whatever, And so you know how these different plants perform through time. And some observable characteristics that matter to me: hyperprecocity. I don't want to wait 50 years for a tree to produce a nut. With chestnuts, I basically planted all these plants, stood at the head of the bed, and I said, look, you guys will produce chestnuts within 3 years, so I'm going to rip you out of the ground and throw you in a burn pile. And as of 2 years ago, approximately 80 to 85% of all of our hazelnut plants that you get, they will start to flower within their second growing season. Of course, you're not going to get full commercial yields out of a 2-year plant that's knee high, but you'll get the fast reproduction, which that's what's important. Is we want to roll those genetic dice as soon as we can, as fast as we can, to get the next varieties in order to stay competitive with natural disturbances, the changes in the weather. 2 years ago, it was we had twice the normal rainfall, floods everywhere, landslides and slumping, roads washed out, bridges gone. This year, between February and September 22nd, we had 0.7 inches of rain. This was a functional desert. It was declared a disaster area, horrible drought, 110 degrees in the middle of summertime. We still had green grass on New Forest Farm, never had to feed hay to the cattle. Our objectives are to increase the frequency of the superior genetics, the things that help it survive the super hot, the things that help it survive the super cold. And we're not necessarily trying to breed that into individual plants. We want the population to have those desirable traits. Out of that population, we will find 1 or 2 plants here and there that are just amazingly superior, and then we will go ahead and vegetatively propagate those. Those become varieties, cultivars. A population is like a community of plants, animals, or humans whose members interbreed. And the population fitness, what we're looking to do here is we want to have the population survive, reproduce, and thrive in the environment in which they find themselves. That means, minimal soil amendments, compost, any of that kind of stuff. They have to survive in this place the way it is. And to answer the person's question, who was the last one up there, was like, that's how you find the varieties that work at your place. Our varieties have had this selection going on for almost 30 years now, so they've got a good chance of going forward. So start with your foundation population, some from Forest Ag Nursery, and then some from almost every single nursery that you can possibly get. I'm not going to necessarily address non-GMO and CRISPR at this point in time. I'm describing how we're breeding plants. And the whole point here is this population of plants survives and reproduces in the environment in which they find themselves. 110 degrees to 50 below zero is the temperature swings that we've had here in Wisconsin, measured and verified. 0 rain to 120 inches of rain. 116 degrees was the hottest temperature we recorded ever, 50 below zero twice in the past 30 years. That's a heck of a range for plants to survive in, and the population of plants have to survive that. With no care, minimal care, we are allowing nature to show us which plants are best suited for this. Every site is unique. Your site might be more suited for pigeon peas. Mine isn't. Now, these so-called universal cultivars, and I'll just use an apple variety. Let's use Honeycrisp, right? I've tried growing Honeycrisp, and did you know that Honeycrisp lasted maybe 4 years here before everything under the sun just like ate it alive? It was susceptible to every single fungal disease you ever possibly could get, and it was just an absolute wimp. Oh, it tastes delicious, but at what cost? You have to spray how many times a week or a month? The fertility has to be this, the pH has to be that. It has to be a super simplified babied landscape in order for Honeycrisp to work. And it costs you a lot of money to do perfect conditions for the plant. And just to be careful with language, a variety or a cultivar is the name given to a genetic individual. It's a clone. Red Delicious, Honeycrisp, those are clones of one Honeycrisp plant. So that's good for economic predictability. It's good for the biotech companies, university, and nonprofits that want to steal genetic rights from farmers, woody, collectors, indigenous peoples in order to obtain the genetic rights and patent it so then they can get royalties and support their research to try to promote setting up these really ridiculous orchard systems. We're not necessarily interested in finding varieties and cultivars. we are breeding for population fitness. Two types of mass selections. Positive mass selection. This is when you start with your base population and you keep adding new genetics to it. You find a new, either the wild find or another university bred, patented variety, add it to your system. It may have some positive traits. It comes into your system, and when you reproduce from your system from seed, those traits are now in your population. Then there's negative mass selection, removing the undesirable plants. And here's an interesting question. How do you know if a plant is susceptible to a disease? Easy, it gets a disease. What happens to a plant that gets a disease and dies from it? Who cares? It's gone. I don't have to figure out which one is susceptible to disease. Well, how do I know which ones don't get the disease? Well, they don't get the disease. And then they pass their genes on to the next generation that now has those characteristics in it. This is a super, super simple way to produce the varieties that will work in your climate and to keep changing through time as the climate changes, weather changes, etc. So you start by selecting your base population, and then you mix desirable plants. You select the desirable plants from your base population, you mix their offspring to raise the next generation, you evaluate in field trials, and then you select superior individuals that you might want to clone and start as a variety. So the first generation, we have our base population, anywhere from 2,000 to 2 zillion plants, put them in this one area, and we evaluate, we check them out, which ones are doing great, which ones are yielding high yields, regular yields, super delicious, early in their lives, pest and disease free, and the ones that aren't, we rogue them. We get rid of them. Now the seed from the winners that we didn't get rid of, we now plant that somewhere else, and we continue the process again. Rogue is a genetics term to mean removing the inferior or the defective plants. That's negative selection. We just get rid of them. How do we do it? I have a Bertie orchard mower, heavy duty flail chopper, and I just grind the crap out of stuff. And you chip it all up. And what you end up with is the smaller diameter material is ramial wood chips. You can get books and learn all kinds of stuff about using ramial wood chips as an amendment. Well, why go out and purchase an input that you bring to your farm and apply as a soil building technique when you can just grow it on the site and chip it? One of the things about ramial, the term, it means the smaller diameter material. One of the reasons why the smaller diameter material is so helpful in this regard, you notice this is 1, 2, 3, 4 different years of growth. So 4 years in, there's wood 3 years thick on this little hazelnut stem, and it's still green. Green is chlorophyll. It's still photosynthesizing. A little bit of light is getting to it. Well, all of this is juicy. It's moist. That's why when you're making firewood, you dry your wood for a year to get rid of all of this intracellular moisture. Inside there is the protoplasm of living cells. It has every single nutrient that a plant can want, and it's very, very water soluble. So when you chip your small diameter material when it's green, the next few rains that come along, you have a instant liquid fertilizer rush, and all your plants just get giddy with excitement. The harder debris stays behind. All the green nutrients get flushed out of it. Now your slower decomposers start kicking in. And what's really interesting is when people say that shiitake mushrooms don't naturalize and spread, they've never been to my place. This is a naturalized population of shiitake mushrooms growing in the debris from chipping branches from our trees, which is part of the genetic selection process to get rid of the ones that we don't want. And it makes incredible soil, just the most amazingly black, crumbly, soft, rich soil. So remember with the rye, when I was rolling down the rye, what did I do there? I inoculated with Stropharia mushrooms. Stropharia mushrooms love to have wood chips. That's what they use as their food. Well, so doesn't shiitakes. So don't oyster mushrooms. So you scatter the spawn there, and this is what it actually looks like when I do a mowing through a woody crop section. This is approximately 1 month before harvest. Go through with a chainsaw first. I knock down the material. Larger material stuff turns into firewood. medium material stuff I take home and inoculate with mushrooms on logs. Then the smallest stuff, 2-inch diameter, so I chip, and that's the ramial wood chips. Now I get a flush of fertilizer on the crop 1 month before it's due to be harvested. So it's precision timing for fertilizer. And now I have a nice mowed green sward for me to go through and any other pickers that come along to help harvest whatever the crop is. And then after we've harvested the crop, we don't pick everything and then grade in a packing shed. We pick the fruit, and if it's got bugs on it, we throw it on the ground. You're not supposed to do that because then the larvae will come out and go into the soil and pupate. It's like, well, we throw it on the ground because as soon as we're done picking, we turn the pigs loose and the cows loose, and they eat every single last apple or pear up off the ground. And in so doing, they're eating all of the pest larvae and turning it into pork chops. And this is what we do with the larger diameter material. I think like I said earlier, is I eat mushrooms almost every single day. So our first reproductive year, we save the seed, we put them into the secondary block. Now we take some of the best plants from that secondary block and we go repopulate our initial block. So what has happened is we've now improved the overall yield of that first planting block. And then we continue the process of finding the best out of the first block and out of the second block, and just keep doing this process over and over and over. We'll also bring in plants from other nurseries that we find exciting, and we bring them in and add them to our primary planting block. And so over time, what happens is the genetics and the bearing characteristics, the overall behavior of these plants gets better as time goes on. University of Wisconsin Extension has done measurements on yields from my hazelnuts for at least 15 years now. And the kernel size on my hazelnuts is now 4 millimeters larger than it used to be 15 years ago. 4 millimeters is not a lot, but that's almost a half an inch, okay? And if you're looking at the volume of the kernel, the volume of a sphere, that's a cubic relationship. And so that's 4 times 4 times 4, that much more kernel per nut in just 15 years worth of time. In the meantime, the whole site has been producing, pork and beef and apples and produce and grains and honey, and apples. So if you want to buy some plants, first year nursery stock, go to forestag.com. We specialize in hazelnuts and chestnuts and woody crops in general, but those are the two that we sell the most of, and we've done the most intensive breeding work on because they've responded the quickest. Apples, with the apples that we've grown, I started by getting apples from all across the country, whatever varieties I could get. I had 39 different varieties. I plant like 4 examples of each one, then treat them with stun, sheer total utter neglect. And as time went on, they fall apart, they get diseases, they start to die. There's about 30 of that initial planting that have made it through the whole thing. Well, then we start saving the seed from those fruit, and we're told, oh, don't save the seed from your fruit, it won't come out true to type. Well, for one, there's no example anywhere on the planet of an apple seed turning into anything other than an apple tree. So that's a lie. That's a false concept. They will come out true to type. They won't be just like their parent. They're going to be different than their parent. That's the whole point of mass selection. That's the whole point of sexual reproduction. We need that variability to cast these new variants that can survive extreme hot, extreme cold, extreme wet, extreme dry, etc. So this kind of plant breeding that we're doing, it occurs in systems where there's no herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, fertilizers are used. Disease is allowed to run rampant. Competitive selection pressure is high. Pest and disease selection pressure is high, but it cash flows. It cash flows with grains, with vegetables, with mushrooms, hazelnuts, pine nuts, apples, cherries, grapes, berries, beef, pork, poultry, mushrooms, honey, beeswax products, and oh yeah, and if you're an apple grower, there's apples in there too. It works. It really does. Why isn't this advancing for me? It's stalled. There we go. Our plants are not sissies. They're not expensively grown with perfect weed control, perfect irrigation, and a little tub of chemicals that will die if you don't take care of them. They're rugged little SOBs. And there's an example of them right there. They're grown, bred, and selected for cold hardiness, early reproduction, disease resistance, high yield in the real world with heavy competition, all kinds of weather with less than perfect care. And with minimal inputs, all of a sudden, it just makes it so much more affordable to do, and it is actually profitable. Mass selection breeding is great for improving old varieties, land-raised varieties. It's good for purifying and improved varieties. So even if you have F1 hybrids, you can use mass selection. You'll have all kinds of variability to that first generation, but that's fine. That's what mass selection is all about, because we're going to select the traits and the characteristics that we want. It's simple and quick, and allows us to capture more sunlight per acre. We increase the fertility of soil in our area. We have wildlife populations that are off the charts. We have badgers that live here, 3 or 4 different species of weasels, 7 different kinds of amphibians. This used to be a cornfield, and it's an amazing oak savanna. It's called the degraded oak savanna. The Society of Ecological Restoration folks had a tour here once, and because there were non-native species out here and like yellow sweet clover and stuff, they call it a degraded oak savanna. But it has all the indicator species of an oak savanna, and it pays the bills. Crops developed through mass selection are variable, not as uniform as a pure line variety. I consider that a merit, not a demerit. The improvement through mass selection is generally less than could be achieved through pure line selection. Will prove that to me. And in the absence of a progeny test, it's not possible to determine if they're homozygous or not. It's like, who the heck cares? I've got plants that are surviving with sheer total utter neglect in all kinds of conditions. I have at least 4 different apple that I could call them varieties and release them. One I can slice, put on a picnic table in the pouring rain, and it will dehydrate and not turn brown. And I didn't have to use any kind of crazy breeding program or government funding to do it. And now, due to the popularity of pure line variety, mass selection is not commonly used. No, because it's the desire of the institutions to control the genetics and the royalties from those patents. That's why mass selection is uncommon. And but you won't get yields that way. Don't tell these trees you can't get yields that way. And what I want you to do, especially apple growers, look at these fruit, and I want you to count how many pest and disease infected fruit are on this tree. These fruit are grown with 0 sprays for anything, for pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, nothing. Certified organic for 25 years here, doing nothing. It's great. And of course, food juice, feed, vinegar, and my favorite is alcohol. This is real. This is not a joke. Nature works. It has been functioning on this planet since the dawn of time, whenever you believe that to have happened. These are the processes that nature goes through in order to persist that long on the planet. And populations of plants live in a place even if there are mineral deficiencies or mineral surpluses or not enough water or too much water. This is how nature operates. And when we change our own behavior and we start to interact with the planet the way it actually is and actually operate the way it does, it becomes so affordable to manage. Your costs go way the heck down. And so you may get lower total yields on everything, but the combined total yield is greater than if you had grown any one particular thing. And if you don't believe it, come see it for yourself. You don't even have to see it for yourself at my place. There are now literally hundreds of examples of farms like this across the USA where folks have done restoration agriculture systems. It's a revolutionary new way to grow stuff, or it's a revolutionary old way to grow stuff. You make the decision on that one. And if we don't come up with plants and animal communities that can survive in this world with the changing conditions from politics to climate, rainfall and weather patterns, lack of fertilizers, et cetera, if we can't come up with systems that can survive the mass disturbance that humanity finds itself in right now, we're in deep doo-doo. And with that, I will leave you with this right here. And hopefully I didn't overrun time or underrun time. And so how about fielding some questions?
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. All right, let's start with, so we've got some people here who are more urban. They live in smaller places, and some live in communities that have obviously restrictions, subdivisions. So how would you make this work in an urban setting?
One of the things that I have on my farm is a 20-foot diameter circle with all of the species that I've mentioned that are in there, the oak, chestnut, plum, cherry, et cetera, all the way down through the whole list. And then I also have included in there Korean pine for a pine nut. 20-foot diameter, and I mulched it with sawdust. And on mine, I didn't put the black plastic edging around it, but you could if you're in a suburb. So with the sawdust mulch that I use, I inoculate that with what? Stropharia mushroom spawn. So every single plant in it is part of the same plant community. They belong together, have always lived together, and the decomposition cycle is also part of the food system. And you can do this as a landscape, and it would look really beautiful in a small setting. However, one of the issues that happens when you're doing things on a small scale is you lose some of the benefits of a lot of the ecological kind of control mechanisms for pest and disease control require larger populations for it to happen well in. So if you put in a 20-foot diameter circle, let's take suburban Milwaukee, and you're surrounded by all these, mowed green suburbs, and everybody's spraying everything for whatever, you've just created an oasis for every pest and every disease to come to. And you don't have enough pests in order to feed the pest predators. And you don't have enough diseases to make predator populations crash. You don't have enough examples of hazelnuts. You can't have like 10,000 hazelnuts in a 20-foot diameter circle and let the disease susceptible ones die. So some of the things that you lose in the suburban setting are those natural balances and natural controls. But what you have is now the influence of the human is that much more powerful. You can go and you can take care of 100 plants that are in a 20-foot circle. It's pretty easy. And if you don't take immaculate care of it, it's okay. They're cousins. They belong together. They'll be all right. It just won't be as flawless as you might want it to be. So mimicking natural plant community types, even in a suburban setting on a small scale, is super, super simple, easy way to get so many different things, so many food plants growing in one place.
Yes. And I think the point, so Michael had asked and mentioned about, not being able to have, animals in suburban spaces. So you can still do this without having those animals, right?
Well, you have animals. You have, subsoil animals. You'll have squirrels. You'll have rabbits. And actually, that's another thing with in the suburban situation is like with hazelnuts, for example, you have to harvest them a little bit before they're ripe in a suburban setting, because the minute they're ripe, the squirrels, the chipmunks, the mice, the woodpeckers, the blue jays, they harvest everything you got. And so you lose a little bit of the, the pest and disease control, natural pest and disease control in the suburban setting, but you can do it. And you, as the human, now have a stronger role to play, and it's manageable. It's a small yard.
Great. All right. So Jared asks, do you ever use landscape fabric to help plants get established out in the field?
Well, what did I say about stun? And where did nature ever go buy some landscape fabric? I mow the grass. I knife the plants in. We put them in high density, and if they can't survive that, I'm not interested. They die. So it's easy, because if they needed landscape fabric, that's too much work already. You're on a slippery slope. You're gonna say, well, gee, now I get this landscape fabric. It's growing too fast. Oh, now it's attracting aphids. Oh my gosh, what happened? Well, because it was growing too fast. There's too much nitrogen there. Well, now it's growing too fast. It sticks up above the weeds. The deer come by and they bite off the tips. Well, how do I get rid of the aphids? Well, you can spray this. Well, how do I get rid of the deer? You can put up a deer fence and on you go. And pretty soon, well, now I'm not getting the nutrient cycling that I need. Well, then you have to add this. Then you have to add that. Pretty soon you're on NPR with Larry Mueller doing garden talk.
That's great.
Hey, Mark, I just hopped in to see if you might be able to turn on a light. I know you can see us on your bright screen, but we can't see you. You're just a reflection.
I can, but I got to get up and leave, and then when I come back, it might be pointing at some pretty scary stuff.
We'll take our chances.
Just a reminder, you guys can continue to put some things in the Q&A.
All right.
And we'll field those. There we go.
Okay, that's not so bad. Looking at my banjos.
That's awesome. All right. So Juan Carlos asks, Mark, could you expand a little more on the grains integrated into your system? Juan Carlos is on a small 3-acre farm that's experimenting with rice, but it's hard to start. It's hard. The hard part is processing them since everything has to be done by hand.
Yeah, there is small scale equipment for processing grains that's available. You can find it's mostly Africa and third world type situations. However, what the easy shoe in is the way to deal with small grains is you just turn the pigs loose and they'll eat everything. And one of the people was saying that they can't have livestock or animals. You can have guinea pigs. And actually, guinea pigs are being used quite a bit now in Central and South America as livestock. They go around, they graze all your grass and stuff like that. And evidently, they're delicious. I've never eaten a guinea pig. And so with the small grains, like I mentioned, I'm growing them mostly for the biomass. I want all that straw and all those roots to die and rot and feed my soil food web. And then they resprout when I mash them down. You may have seen roller crimpers that, you kind of roll along the top and it kills cover crops. That's one way to do it. You can use a tiller. I have a 8-foot wide rotavator that I rarely use. If I use it, I'll use it on a green grain crop, not spinning. And I drop it down and I just roll it along and it goes thump, 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 and it crimps all the stems. So there's ways to pack it down. I'm doing it for biomass for fertility, mostly for my trees.
Great. And so I think you probably already answered this, but just to make it clear, do you prune any of your trees?
Here's how I prune the trees is when the trees are small, a branch now is in the way. And if I'm going by mowing and the branch hits the tractor and it moves out of the way, it doesn't bother me. I don't want to cut that branch because that poor little guy's tried really hard to grow, so I'm going to let it grow. Well, then later on, as that branch starts to interfere with me, if I can get my arm under it and lift it up over the roll cage over my head, I'll go ahead and lift it up over the roll cage over my head. But the minute that branch tries to spear me and push me off the back of the tractor, boom, off of that branch and it gets chipped. That's it. Sometimes when I'm going through, like right now, I'm going through a block of Asian pears and apples, doing a lot of negative selection, and I'm also removing branches. And what I'll look for is crossed branches, shaded branches. And so this is the first time in I think 10 years that I've been through that block. So now I'm going to go through and I'll do some a little bit extreme to open it up, get some sunlight, get some airflow, and then the larger material. I love the apple and pear wood for smoking meats. I'm a bloodthirsty carnivore. I used to be a vegetarian. I have converted. I can now eat things that I can't eat. I can't eat grass. Cows can. I think cows are delicious. And so I do prune, but it's minimalist pruning. So eventually you saw that picture with the chips when I was driving through the trees, how it was straight on either side. And I was right up next to those trees. There were no branches sticking out in the row. So eventually it turns into these tunnels that I'm driving through the tunnels.
Oh, that's cool. All right. Zen asks, do you use poultry in the system, and how do you keep them in the area if you do? Or do you use the stun approach? Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. How do you keep them in the area and protected from the wildlife that the system attracts? Or do you just use the stun approach with the chickens too?
Absolutely have used the stun approach with the poultry. I've used chickens and guineas, had some ducks and turkeys. Saw some pictures, probably the turkeys. I didn't show some of the pictures of my chickens. And with the chickens is, we would harvest them for meat, not doing them for eggs. We were doing it for meat. And then at the end of the season, I would look for the ones that were able to escape me quite readily. And the ones that would come up to me and I could hook them with a little chicken catcher, those were the ones that would go. Well, then in the fall, when they'd go to sleep at night up in the trees, then I'd catch them, clip their wings, put them in a coop for the wintertime, then let them out again the next spring, save a bunch of eggs. When the chicks hatch, I throw them at the hens, and the hens would go, what the heck? These little chicks are trying to stay warm. The little chicks would come underneath and try to stay warm. So no brooders, no taking care of it like that. And the ones that couldn't survive that died. So I was brutally cruel, I guess, to, hundreds and hundreds of little chickens. But it took about 3 years, and all of a sudden I had what are called Jurassic chickens. And I apologize for not putting the picture of the Jurassic chickens, because I'd make my call, I'd call the chickens, they come running, I throw a little scratch to them so they keep habituated to coming to me. And you look at these girls and you see their eye, and they're little stink-eyed dinosaurs. They are not little tame little barnyard chickens. Well, then what happened as they have all kinds of cover. They can hide underneath the bushes, the hazelnuts. Hazelnuts can handle the amount of manure that poultry will throw under them, and they're excellent cover for protection from predators. However, 4 years ago now, maybe it's 5 years ago, our poultry running around all over the place attracted a Cooper's hawk. We've had foxes and skunks and coyotes and raccoons, everything that eats chickens, but the chickens were able to get up in trees and get up in the perches inside the chicken coop. Cooper's hawks eat birds. They only eat birds. If you can't train them to eat anything other than birds, you can defend the birds and they will go get your birds. They will land 50 feet away and pretend to be a chicken, walk in and then kill a chicken. And so once one Cooper's hawk moved in, we called him Bradley. Bradley invited all of his friends, his cousins, his relatives, and pretty soon we were not able to keep poultry even in the chicken coop, because they would figure out how to break into the chicken coop, go inside and catch chickens. So we're on a break now. I haven't had poultry on the farm for 3 years, and I have guineas down the road for me that I'm armoring my chicken coop. This is like this ridiculous, double, triple, quadruple fence, iron plate, machine guns out front, and I'm going to try my guineas again and see how it goes. So yeah, one of the things we will encounter as we do restoration, ecological restoration, we're going to encounter all the problems that our ancestors dealt with. We have bears on the farm now, and this year a sow raised a cub. They knock over beehives. They'll go after young stock, cattle and whatnot. The coyotes used to come through our farm. Now they come from our farm. I actually have a continual stage of low-grade warfare with coyotes. They're not really welcome. Raccoons are idiots, and I've got a border collie that loves to murder raccoons. So we're going to encounter what our ancestors did. Is all these things out there want to eat our abundance, and our job now is how do we learn to live with all these other species in some kind of a harmony, knowing that it's not going to necessarily be a cute, Bambi type harmony, that there's going to be a little bit of discomfort on both sides.
Yep. All right, let's see. Owen Smith asks, are there any other resources out there to read more about mass selection and Luther Burbank's work?
That's why I'd go back to the beginning of this and click on the Luther Burbank's links, and then start, going down that rabbit hole. That Luther Burbank had quite a bit. He wrote quite a bit. People wrote quite a bit about him. And what ended up happening in his later days, he made a political mistake in that he said, oh yeah, and this idea of breeding for superior to varieties applies to humans too. And he wrote, mass selection and the human plant. And he joined this particular political party that had one of their party platforms was called eugenics. And that kind of fell out of political favor. And that was a little bit problematic for old buddy Luther. I don't apply it to humans. I don't.
All right. Owen also asks, when you were doing the annual vegetable crops in your system, how did you plant those into the system?
Alley cropping. If you look up agroforestry techniques, alley cropping is one of them. Is you have a row of trees, or a band of trees. In my case, would be several different species of trees, and then an alley in between. So all the pictures of the grains and the legumes that you saw, that was part of my fertility building cycle when I was doing produce. So after I stopped doing produce, I'm continuing to do that fertility building cycle because it's benefiting my trees. There's something I still have. I had 2 acres of asparagus. It's almost 27, 28-year-old patch of asparagus. In its heyday, it was producing about 2,500 pounds of asparagus a year, $3 a pound for 6 weeks of work in the springtime. That's a pretty groovy crop. But all I was taking care of the asparagus for is because it's taking care of my chestnut mulberry system that's right next to it. And so, the small grains were part of the fertility building cycle for the rotation with produce.
Great. Let's see, Danny asks, do you have any suggestions or experience for transitioning spaces where poison ivy is the dominant plant or for where poison ivy persistently wants to come back even after planting?
So here's some of the things. One of the things with any kind of, this is where why sheer total utter neglect isn't the word, it's strategic total utter neglect. IPM, integrated pest management, is really significant. IPM folks still use chemical sprays and all that kind of stuff, but what's most important is they begin to understand what is the life cycle of these pests, what's the life cycle of these diseases, when can I most easily disrupt them with the minimal effort. One of the things that poison ivy is an indicator of, if you think about seeds, some seeds require light to sprout, some seeds require, firm packed soil, some seeds need to be on the surface, blah, 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 all have different conditions. Certain weed seeds will only sprout when there's certain chemical conditions in the soil. Like foxtail, that will sprout when it's compacted and it was worked, the soil was worked when it was too moist, and that causes the magnesium calcium ratio to go out of whack, and you got foxtail all over the place. Poison ivy is one that classically sprouts when there is a deficiency of calcium. And so what you do is go take a soil test just to prove this, and you'll see that your calcium levels are low in that soil. We want about a 75% base saturation of calcium in that soil, a 75% to 25% calcium to magnesium. And then as you approach that, go ahead, do your ripping out all of the poison ivy, amend with your calcium, and it won't come back as vigorously. Or you can work with poison ivy, and I've had conversations with several patches of poison ivy. They said, okay, I see you, I know where you are, and if you guys expand past here, I'm going to calcium you to death. And so I know where they are. Got them under control.
Awesome. All right, let's see. Zen asks, how do you get your plantings or sowings to outcompete native weeds?
I don't. Well, I don't, because I know that succession is going in this direction. Let's take thistles as an example, because they're quite common in folks that are coming out of annual cropping. They're a biennial, and a thistle will only sprout if there's bare soil that seed falls on. And so your goal is to get it past bare soil. And if you're ever looking down and you see bare soil, you're going to have thistles forever. And it's not that you have to fight against them. It's just that you just got to prevent them from having a place to sprout and grow. And so all you got to do is stay on top of thistles 3 years in a row and they'll be gone. Canada thistle is a little bit different. And this is a trick that a long time ago, I was whining about Canada thistle, and this old timer in the audience says, oh, all you do is you go out and mow them in the rain. I'm like, yeah, that right, sure. And so it was a rainy day. I had nothing else to do. It's like, what the heck? Why not? Why don't I go mow my Canada thistle? Well, the white that appears on the tops of thistles? Evidently, that's a viral thing, viral disease. And so if you go mow it in the rain, you just spread that virus to every single thistle that's out there. And then the tubes, the stem is hollow, so the rain gets in there, and you get all kinds of decay organisms in there, and you'll have this rotting, stinking mess of Canada thistle in no time. And every time the Canada thistle tries to sprout, it's got that white viral disease on it. Unbelievable how I've gotten Canada thistle to go away. So back to the poison ivy and the other weeds, we have to understand, how do they reproduce? Why do they reproduce? What conditions are we causing that are causing them to thrive instead of our plants? And the simplest thing that I do is I mow right next to my plants, and that's it. If I can get 3 times a year, great. If I can't afford it, I know in 2008, I don't think I mowed at all because the price of diesel fuel was like $7-8 for a gallon of diesel fuel. I didn't mow. Everything was just fine. The weeds go crazy, and there's actually is a weed control officer out here, and got on my case once about thistles, because I had thistles and the tufts are flowing away. And yet right next to me was a 40-acre field of CRP. I said, wait a minute, I'm certified organic. I got, a couple dozen thistles, and somebody complained about my thistles spreading to their cornfields. They're using herbicides. Why should they care? And why should you come after me when I got 14 or 15 thistles that are going to seed when that guy's got 40 acres? And he's like, well, you got a point, and left me alone. So we have to understand how the plant works, how does it reproduce, how does it spread, what are we doing culturally that's giving it the opportunity to thrive, and that's the learning that we have to do.
Awesome, great. All right, let's see. When you're growing your young plants, are you using a particular soil and inoculating with microbes, or using your own compost and native microbes?
Wow. What do you mean with young plants? What do they mean? I'm putting the plants in the ground, bare root dormant, stick them in the ground. And here's one of the things about succession. If we start with the bare rock, and you guys see that picture, go back to it again. You start with the bare rock and you go through time. What happens is there's all these bacteria and spores free floating in the atmosphere as life starts getting established on the rock with the lichens and the mosses, and then, you know, grasses and all that kind of stuff. These things come in out of the atmosphere and the conditions allow them to thrive. So we don't need to do these inoculations unless we want to. Let's take an old sterile cornfield that's been under chemicals for, 20, 30 years or so. You may want to jumpstart that with some compost teas and that sort of thing. But in a system where, like what I did, is I just started and you let it go, you leave it alone. Succession solves that problem. All of those things come in all on their own. Yep. One thing that succession doesn't necessarily do is it doesn't solve your mineral imbalances. The bedrock is the bedrock. The Northeast, mostly granite, there's hardly any calcium there. You might have to buy some calcium to bring it in to give your system a baseline to get established with. Other places, like in the arid West, they have too much calcium. So you may need to bring in some granite dust or basalt and spread that through the system. But the biology, once you have those minerals balanced pretty close, the biology kicks in and takes over all by itself. No need for compost teas. And you saw those pictures of me digging my hands in. That is the system itself creating that soil. I wasn't adding anything other than knowing when to cut those plants and to chip them up and make sure they laid all in place. Let nature take care of it.
Here's a great question. So, you've talked about all the crops that you get back. How do you manage harvesting so many different crops?
I don't harvest everything anymore because I can't keep up with it. I'd mentioned that the more species you have per unit area, the more your total yield is. I can basically only handle 3 woody plant species and 2 animal species at any one time. It's just too crazy for me. What I will do during hazelnut harvest is I will hire a crew of Amish folks to come in. And what's really great about hazelnut season is they've just finished their produce season and they're not quite yet ready to harvest corn. And so I grab them for hazelnut harvest, and a crew of 4 can go over my property here and harvest several tons. We had 18 or 20 produce bins full of hazels this year. And just, 4 people in a week. It's not like pick. It's like, look, guys, get out here. And they strip it. Just rip through here. And I don't care if you get everything. Get as much as you can. Just do it fast. They don't bruise like apples. Most of my apples these days, I did cider for quite a few years. And nowadays I'm not doing that anymore because it's too much work. It's just easier to let them fall off the tree and let the pigs harvest it. I like pork chops.
All right. Mark Wolbers, I can't remember where Mark is from, but he says, when does forestag.com start to accept orders for scionwood?
The scionwood situation, that would be a phone conversation, email conversation. Drop us a line. We can let you know what we have. And what I do is, here's another thing, is like, oh, you got to harvest it at this particular time, and you got to hold it in the fridge, do this, and keep it moist, and make sure it doesn't mold. It's like, that sounds like a hell of a lot of work. What I do is I go out when it's like 20 below zero, and I cut it all, and I put it in bags, and I put it in the freezer. I figured it was frozen. Let's keep it frozen. It's just fine. Then I take it out in the morning, soak it, and then I go do my grafting during the day. So that's how I do it. And probably January, February, by then, we can at least start to be thinking about scionwood. And I just saw the book reference for the Oak Savanna map. That actually came out of a 1993 EPA study, a descriptive analysis of oak savanna across the USA by Alan Haney and Stephen Applebaum. And that changed my world. As soon as I saw that, it's like, oh my gosh, why don't I just do this? And it changed the world.
All right, one last question. Michael says, currently I have young apple trees with wood chip mulch out to the drip line. If the apple trees have to be the tallest trees in the area, what would you recommend to plant to add diversity to the mulch drip line area to improve the overall micro ecosystem?
Let's go right back to that the plant community type. The apples are a part of the oak plant community type. Anything in the Prunus genus, we can add, roses of various different kinds, big, huge, gigantic rugosa roses. We can add quince, medlars. Then you go ahead, you add your currants, your gooseberries, grapes, raspberries, blackberries, thimbleberries. I actually followed something right out of the Permaculture Designer's Manual and put comfrey in a ring at drip line. And it's phenomenal. As long as you're mowing on the outside of it, it does incredible for weed control and makes nice fertile soil. I have daffodils growing underneath, zillions of daffodils. I used to harvest daffodils and sell daffodils, but I don't anymore. But I got daffodils like you wouldn't believe. And then various different irises. I'm somewhat of an iris collector. And so what I do is, as I'm traveling around, if I see somebody has a pretty cool, wow, that's a really neat colored iris, I'll go ahead and make some kind of deal and grab that. So I got irises out there. And daffodils are awesome because they bloom 3 weeks before the apples do. And the very first bees that are out there, mostly, various different wild native bees, they're all over the daffodils. And then the honeybees start to work the daffodils. And you think about that. How long does it take for a bee to raise the next generation? 3 weeks. That's a 4. 3 weeks. So they come out here, they get into the daffodils. The daffodils prime them to be out where the apples are. And then they raise the next generation right in time for the apples. That was something I just discovered just by planting the daffodils with the apple trees. It's like, oh my goodness, look at this incredible timing. Oh. And you think about amphibian habitat, put little flower pots in their side, have little basins of water here and there. All these different frogs and toads and tree frogs, they're eating your insect pests like you wouldn't believe. And toads, I guess, are the only ones that have been observed eating plum curculio, which is a big pest in your apples and stone fruits. And so you got to have those amphibians out there.
Yep, great. All right, we have reached the end of our time, and I want to thank Mark for being generous and offering this session and presentation. This has been fabulous. And I'm going to turn this back over to Leslie to do a little bit of outro for all of you. And then don't forget, we have one more session tonight. So Mark, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate lots of good information. And again, you guys be sure that you check the website. You can get his book. I highly recommend that book. It was so informative for me, and just, and if you're not familiar with permaculture, definitely dive into the permaculture literature, because you'll learn a lot about the things he talked about here through some of that literature. All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So on behalf of NAFEX, I'd like to thank Mark, Chris for moderating this, and our sponsors. This conference would not be possible without them. And that's One Green World Nursery, Copenhagen Farms Nursery, Fedco Seeds, orchardpeople.com, Southern Cultured Orchard and Nursery, and more. So once again, this is going to be recorded and available on our website at nafex.org for members for the next year. So it'll be up in a couple of days, along with bonus resources like a PDF of Mark's PowerPoint. And then in about a year, we'll migrate it over to our YouTube channel, which is NAFEX TV on YouTube. There'll be, let's see. Oh, and don't forget that our next session is going to be very cool. It's Timothy Lane talking about hybrid persimmon. It's going to be a great talk. It's going to be moderated by Chris Homanix, so it should be an excellent discussion. And we have 2 awesome sessions tomorrow. We have our NAFEX annual meeting, which sounds boring. It's not. It's fun. It's short business, and then lots of fun and sharing. So come talk about what you're doing or see what other people are doing. That's going to be at noon Eastern. And then at 2 p.m., our closing keynote is with Dr. Elaine Ingham, who is going to be talking about the soil food web and how we build healthy plants from starting with healthy soil. So thanks to everybody for being here tonight. It's been wonderful. Mark, thank you again. It was terrific.
Thank you, everybody. See ya.